Where the hell do good ideas come from? Why are they so hard to come by? How do you know when you've got a good one that will grow your business exponentially? The hunt for answers to these questions continues today with Dan Munday, a 20-year veteran of reality TV, having contributed to the success of shows including Survivor, The Apprentice, and Real Housewives. It's a big thinking episode 644 of the 14-year-old award-winning Small Business Big Marketing podcast.
Well, I said, welcome to a small business marketing show where successful small business owners share their souls to take your marketing straight to the lead. Now, here's your host, Mr. Timbo Reid.
And welcome back to your weekly dose of creative marketing. I'm your host, Timbo Reid, and I have an insatiable curiosity for uncovering marketing ideas that help businesses just like yours, yes, yours, to grow. And I do that through having a weekly in-depth conversation with a successful business founder or owner who has walked the path before us. You, infinitely more importantly, well, you're a motivated business owner, ready to crank out some great marketing to build that beautiful business of yours into, guess what? Yes, correct. The empire that it absolutely deserves to be. As per usual, team, there's marketing GOLD dripping from the ceiling over here at Small Business Big Marketing's HQ. So let's get stuck right in. Time to pause for a very quick celebration. We hit 50 members of my Patreon this week. So a very, very big thank you to all 50 motivated business owners for supporting the work I do for small businesses. It's hugely appreciated, and it helps me bring even more marketing gold to those ready to take the next step in their business. If you're not one of the motivated business owners who've joined, then give it some consideration if you're looking for some additional marketing support, ideas from yours truly. If one of the 50 ideas I've shared so far inside the Patreon can't save you the cost of membership, then I am seriously doing something wrong. Just this past week, I've started a discussion around sponsorship, which was instigated after I saw 2,000-year-old billboards at the Colosseum on my trip to Rome recently. I've uploaded video versions of my interviews with Noam Barden, the fellow who's taking on Twitter with his new social media post, called Post, I should say, and Hugh Crothers, the fellow who I interviewed last week, who's created Drip, a sexual wellbeing brand that's disrupting a category full of stigma. And I've also uploaded a video showing the placement of a large clothing brand logo in a very questionable place. So we've got a bit of a discussion going on about where you should or shouldn't put your precious brand. Membership starts at a tax-deductible $8.50 a month with no lock-ins, and I've just opened a 7-day free trial for the silver tier, which is $47 a month. So go check it out at patreon.com/marketing podcast. You got nothing to lose and plenty to gain, as a number of members have already indicated that they've made much more than their monthly investment back. And that makes me very happy. Check it out, patreon.com/marketing podcast. Now, if you're a long-time listener to this podcast, you'll know how much I love and respect the power of a good idea. This dates all the way back to my first job in Australia's largest advertising agency, where ideas were all we had, and we charged pretty handsomely for them. Whether we're talking about an idea for a new business, a new product or service, a campaign headline, a promotion, or maybe you're just looking for a more creative way to tell your story, a good idea really is worth its weight in gold. Today's ideas are more important than ever, with competition in every industry, every category, every market at an all-time high. And in a world of sameness, a great idea can be your point of difference, positioning you well away from the dreaded competition. But it begs the question, where do good ideas come from? Well, to help answer that, let's meet Dan Munday, a 20-year veteran of reality TV, working on global hits including Survivor, through to The Apprentice, which one ex-president hosted, and Real Housewives, which one ex-president might have had something to involvement. Who knows? We'll find out. Dan's involvement in these multi-gazillion-dollar franchises, including designing the show's look and feel, creating the challenges, helping integrate brands in order for them to get commercial outcomes, plus the development and pitching of new shows in this sought-after space. Now working as a freelance creative, Dan recently launched the Sunny Coast Showdown, which is a film and TV talent incubator. I'll put a link to that in the show notes because it's pretty awesome. So lean in as Dan and I explore the art and science of generating and pitching big ideas. Dan, welcome. You've had an interesting career, brother, so far. What's been your most memorable highlight?
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. Memorable highlights from the last 20 years. There's a lot. I think the biggest high I got out of, developing, producing, etc., is selling a show in the room. So that's basically when you go in and pitch, usually, you're pitching a game show, you're pitching a reality competition. Usually they're like, yeah, we'll talk about it, and then you leave, and then there's a series of emails backwards and forwards. It's very rare you walk in and they just say, yes, we want to do it. So I had one of those events in my life when I was pitching. It was my show, and it just sort of floored me. I walked out and went, was that real?
Did you have a sense? Musicians get asked this all the time when they have a hit song. Did you know when you were writing it? Did you have a sense going into that boardroom, Dan, that you were onto something?
We did to a degree, but you never know. Like, there's a thing in the industry which is like, what do the networks want? And the answer is they never know until they see it. So even though we were sort of writing to a mandate and we knew the area, it wasn't until I was halfway through the pitch and you just see the nodding in the room.
That's what you want.
That you're like, all right, you kick it into fifth and really drive it home, and then you walk away with a win sometimes.
On reflection, and hindsight's always 20/20, do you look back at that and go, you know what, we did the work, we were pitching to the right people at the right time, we got our messaging right. I mean, clearly everything was right. But do you look back and go, yeah, we should have done that on other projects, or it was just a one-off?
Yeah, it's like so often timing is the key. You can have the best idea at the wrong time and no one buys it. And then 2 years later, someone has the same idea and it sells and goes global because the timing was right. So it is like getting every touch point in line and them all firing at the same time. It's that Christmas light effect. If they all fire at the same time, you get a great show.
What were you pitching, Dan?
It was a business show. So it was called Dream Funded. It was about crowdfunding like little business ideas, and we sold it as a pilot to Bell Media in Canada, and then it went on to be a network show for ABC.
Jeez, were you looking for a host at the time, just out of interest?
We were, but I called you, but Steve Harvey took up the mantle instead. So we had to.
Not the first time, won't be the last. What's your superpower, Dan?
Superpower. My superpower, I think, would be ingenuity. Kid growing up in Yandina on the sunny coast with not much, we made something out of nothing all the time. And on location of Survivor, we would be in the middle of nowhere. A storm has just destroyed a set that we've spent weeks building. It's like, we need to do a challenge here at 10 o'clock in the morning. What do we got? And, that was the ingenuity that I think helped me rise up through the ranks, was just spur of the moment. I could come up with something out of virtually nothing.
There's something in that. It's funny. Only this week I do some community radio on Noosa FM, and the show I did on Tuesday, it happened to be Sher's birthday. Cher, tomato, whoever, you know what I'm talking about. And I didn't realize, and I always share some fun facts about some of the artists whose songs I play. And she was orphaned at the age of 2, put into a home and raised, in a home, and then with foster parents. So, and there's so many examples of that, isn't there? Where you're raised in a certain way, and it forces you to be, as you say, ingenuity sort of comes to the fore.
Yeah, for sure. And look, it's something hard to sometimes capture because you've got to do it on a very timely thing. It can't just be, all right, we can wait 3 weeks for you to work it out. It's got to be almost instantaneous, and that's where it really works in a crisis situation.
You spent 14 years, Dan, working alongside reality TV royalty in Mark Burnett, who was the creator of Survivor, The Apprentice, probably 2 of the biggest brands in reality TV. What's your biggest learning from working alongside Mark?
Probably he had a saying which was jump in even if you don't know how to swim, which, we can all, work out what that basically means. It didn't mean go and do rash, stupid things. It said it's sort of trust your instincts, trust your work ethic, and trust the people around you. And if you've got those things behind you, take a bit of a step off the deep end and, see if you can do what you want to do. You don't want to overreach, but be brave. Be brave with ideas. I tell people that every day.
Sounds like such a cliche, but it comes up all the time. In fact, my episode last week, I spoke with a fellow. How's this? He has built a competitor to Twitter. It's called Post. It's live. When you go to it, it looks like a poor version of Twitter. Terrible fonts. You can't do certain things, but he just got it to market, and he'll worry about fixing those things as you go. Is that the same as you, where, look, all the ducks weren't lined up. You weren't going to do something stupid or unsafe, but you clearly operate at a point where you go, you know what? Time to jump, boys and girls.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you find a way to make it work. Again, as long as you're not saying, hey, we're going to do a show on the moon, because you can sell that show, but you can't make that show. And the same with the business. But provided you've got the building blocks to go and get it, just go for it.
It's a great bit of advice from Mark. He, what was he like? Was he just a doer? Was he a big thinker and left the detail to the minions?
He was amazing with the fairy dust. He would come in and make moments amazing that we already had to a really good point. He just had this special touch. He was. They talk about method actors that take on the role and the persona of, the role they're playing in a movie. Mark was very much a method producer that when we were doing Survivor, he was wearing khaki and he was like wearing a knife on his belt and like he walked around LA like that. When he was doing The Voice, he started wearing puffer jackets and Reebok pumps and things. When he did the Bible series for history, he grew a massive like Moses beard and started wearing sort of kaftani clothes. And he'd wear it everywhere. He just became who he was selling to and what the show was about. It was phenomenal the way he'd sort of adapt like that.
There's something to be said for that. We should do it more often. I remember interviewing a fellow years ago, Brad. He owned a motorbike company and he was all about cold calling and direct sales. And he'd get on the phone to try and sell these bikes and he'd put a mullet and these wraparound sunnies on and a cap and go into this complete other character who was sort of the ideal buyer of the bike. So he's putting himself in that position. And in fact, only last night I was watching, here's my exciting night last night, I was watching the outtakes of Step Brothers, Will Ferrell and what's his name? And they were doing some voiceovers and even the voiceover booths were dressed up in really cool wallpaper and little bits of furniture. Again, just to put you in a space that isn't, and I'm using air quotes here, corporate or dry.
Yeah, he gave me a great piece of advice for writing shows, which was, we were constantly aimed at Middle America. Like you've got the coast, but you really want to resonate with Middle America. And he's like, Dan, if you want to write a show that the rest of America will watch, go and sit in BF Nowhere, Arkansas, and write a show there. Talk to the people. Have a chat with them about a business show. What would they want to see? And that was the best advice. Like sitting in LA, in Venice Beach, writing a show that's going to appeal to someone from the Midwest, it doesn't work. You've got to go and feel it. So I think putting yourself in the environment, know your market, is power.
Mate, that's an awesome bit of advice there. Yeah, and we don't do that enough. It's going to take time or, I'll feel like a fish out of water or, my time is better spent elsewhere. Fantastic thinking. Ideas are what we're here to talk about, Dan. I imagine you have at least one ideation process. I've always found that a strange word to say, ideation, but what's your primary process for sort of coming up with ideas?
I guess I have a few. I'm very visually driven, that most of my ideas come from, like all of us, something I see. And whether it's, an interaction between people, it's a kid's playground setup that might lead to a show or a challenge. The visual of it really drives me, and then I'll sketch and draw it up that way. If it's more based on need, it's very driven by genres or words. So in my industry, you've got different genres of TV. You might have dating, you might have business, you might have food, and like we need a food dating show. So you would smash those genres together and see what, like, sort of start word building and what words and associations work. And I think the other thing that worked well for us was coming up with a name first, and that's the process we'd use on Survivor. We're kicking and screaming. We used to do a lot based on rock songs because the guy I worked with was a big 70s, 80s rock fan. So we would take 70s, 80s rock song titles and we would build challenges around them. So it was quite a convoluted process, but there's a song Kicking and Screaming.
Just give us an example of that. So you're looking for a bit of stimulus. In this case, it's the title of a 70s or 80s rock song, and you're trying to create a segment for Survivor. So you spark, it's not even a spark. It's just a kind of like, it's an anchor point. You go, okay, we're going to work with Soft Cell's Tainted Love from 1982 in order to get a segment on. What does that journey look like?
All right, so let's say it's Tainted Love. Like let's go with a on-the-spot moment. I'd go to like blind date. Tim's meeting Samantha. They're rocking up. They don't know each other. What Tim doesn't know about Samantha is she has a criminal record. So we're going to let Tim and Samantha get to know each other really well before, and he's going to, in the interview, going to be saying, hey, this girl's really cool. I really like her. She likes what I like. And then she's going to drop the bomb that, she's an ex-felon. How does Tim's view of her then change? Did he still like her for what she was, or has he now got this jaded thing? So that might be, and we'll call that moment in the show Tainted Love, and we'd run all of our contestants through a process like that. The one that happened was a song called Kicking and Screaming. I don't even know who it's by, and we were on a beach in Palau, and he's like kicking and screaming, and he was singing the lyrics, and I'm like, all right, those two coconut palms over there, one person from each tribe holding onto that coconut palm and two people from the other tribe trying to drag him off and drag him over a line. And it was basically a challenge built in 10 seconds. And a lot of times there's a lot more to it than that, but I think they're two examples of just taking that thought and running with it.
Yeah. I love that. Do you, from an idea point of view, Dan, I listened to an interview recently with Seinfeld, who's he's a weapon. We know that, the obvious, like the guy's a genius. He said 24/7, 365, he does not stop looking for and seeking ideas for jokes. It's just what he does. And it was actually Howard Stern who was interviewing him. And Stern said, listen, does that mean when you're with your wife, you're not 100% present? Does it mean when you're with me right now in this interview, you're not 100% present because you are looking for the next gag? And he said, 100%. He said, it's just what I've been put on this earth to do. He's not being rude, and he's still there for the people around him.
That's amazing.
Is that you? And do you think that's healthy? And or is there a better way of doing it? Clearly not, because he made a lot of money.
I'm probably not 100% that direction, but I'm certainly, the lion's share of my time is ideation. Whether I'm surfing or whether I'm at yoga or whether I'm working or, with family, you can't stop that visual input. And if it triggers something, I'll be constantly making notes on my phone. I'm not doing it right now, but constantly making notes of like, oh, this could be a show, or this might be a great product. It's not always restricted to film and television. It could lead you anywhere, but yeah, I'm pretty manic on that front.
You're probably thinking right now how you can take this podcast globally on TV, but if you could come back to just being present with me for the time being, Dan, I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries, mate. All right, I'll bring it back. Yeah. I'll squash that thought.
Yeah, thank you. There are a lot of small business owners listening to this who say, well, that's all right for Dan. Dan was paid to really generate ideas, whether it be for Mark Burnett, whether it be for the talent, whether it be for sponsors, whoever it was. That was your job. It's a lot harder for small business owners, Dan, to do the old work on the business, not in the business. Is there anything there that you can advise as to how do you carve out time, or how can we make the idea of ideas more important in small business owners' minds?
I think for carving out time, I think the example I gave before of getting into the environment of or around the people that are your buyers, so that are your patrons, I think is really important. If you've got a small bar, go visit other bars. Take some time out of where your establishment. Go drink in this little sideshow down there or this big bar there, and sit and have a look around. Try to free yourself of your own job. But then also just getting well away from your devices, etc., I find is really important, because you get so busy sitting at a computer doing the work that you just get ground down by that. You can come back and do the work, have the ideas first, let them blossom, problem solve and troubleshoot in your brain. You'll get a lot more work done in a lot shorter time, and then come back and put it on paper then.
Yes. You precious with your ideas, Dan?
I was. I'm not now. If you don't pitch things and be prepared to see them evolve and change, then in the TV game, nothing gets done. Like, a show's only pure in your mind. As soon as you chat to one person, they'll start adapting it. At the end of the day, the person buying it is the owner of it. So it's a bit like the customer is always right. If they don't like your cup of coffee, you got to change it, whether you think it's the best coffee in the world or not. Same with TV. That business show that I sold, it evolved to everyone else's ideas. I don't think it was the best version of the show, but it's the one that they wanted to put on screen. So you've got to be precious and passionate about it at the start, but then you've got to sort of let go a little bit and trust the people around you. And you're not always right. You're not always the smartest person in the room. I learned that very early on.
There's that old saying, a good idea has 1,000 fathers and a bad idea is an orphan. The preciousness thing is just, it's so ugly. I sort of get it in the sense that if you do have a cracker of an idea, the ego wants to say, well, that was mine. If it's going to be a big idea, I want people to acknowledge that it was mine. But at the same time, an idea can benefit from the input of others. Having worked in large advertising agencies for many years, that preciousness I found really difficult. I was a suit, and so I was always working with art directors and copywriters who were responsible for the headlines and the look of the ads and all that. And you couldn't, you just weren't allowed. Suggest an alternative headline or an alternative idea for talent. I found that incredibly hard, and part of me got it because these guys are getting paid big money to generate big ideas. So it was kind of what they were there to do. But boy, it's hard to work with when someone's really precious and just protecting their ground.
Yeah, loudest voice in the room sort of syndrome. I spent a good part of the last 20 years working in the States, and quite a different mentality there. Like, there it is very loudest voice in the room. Australians with the tall poppy syndrome, we take a step back a little bit, which is good and bad. It can allow more voices to get involved and people being a little bit less precious. But when you talk about the advertising industry and the film industry, like any industry, you've got to get ahead in some way. You've got to be noted. But you can be noted for being a great team player as much as being, the captain of the team. So I think you sort of got to pick your battles when it comes down to being precious.
How do you know when an idea is worth pursuing, Dan? Because the minute you put it out there, the danger of putting it out there is people have an opinion. That's just life. That's human nature. So then you've got to be careful, who do you put it out there to? And then who do you listen to? And do you take on every bit of advice? Like, what's the kind of, do you have an inbuilt kind of spidey sense around that's a good or bad idea?
I think I have a good spidey sense. I also do a lot of research. So, I really try to knuckle down on, has this been done? Who else has done it? How did they do it? New ideas, real new ideas are rare, very, very rare.
Yes.
It's all derivations on different things, but can you do it better? Can you do it cheaper? Can you be more entertaining? So my process is on an idea is to get it on paper. I use Keynote, or PowerPoint, the examples there, and I get it into a deck form and try to pitch it. So I pitch it to myself. I'll pitch it to a couple of devil's advocates that I've grown to know over the years, colleagues, and see if it gets them as excited as I get. I've always got to go in. I'll pitch anyone any time of the day if I believe the idea. But if I've got to pitch someone else's idea, which has happened a few times in the past, it's really, really hard because you've got to be fully invested. You've got to have skin so thick, as you know, because so often it's a no game, particularly in film and TV. Like 90% of what you develop and pitch will be a no when you go in the room to 20 different buyers. But you've got to go in every time believing it. And if you don't believe it, they're not going to believe you. So I've got to go through that process by myself and convince myself it's good, again, combined with that research.
Tell me about that Keynote deck that you put together. I don't expect you to remember it specifically, but you've got an idea, you put it down into a Keynote deck in order to pitch to yourself and then to a couple of devil's advocates. Is there a particular structure? There are little headlines that you work to?
Yeah, no, it's always the same process, and I do it time after time with all my ideas in that sense. And it revolves around photos. Like a picture's worth 1,000 words, like, you know, an old cliche, but a good one. So the process is keywords and a picture to match it. So, you know, based on, you know, our tainted love discussion before, you know, what's that opening picture look like? You know, it's you know, two people holding hands, one of them in an orange jumpsuit. You know, like, all right, you know, and the title, Tainted Love. You know, how do you get that then to the next step? And it's sort of like where we've set up a question. You always want someone about to ask a question about what you're pitching and it's answered on the next page. So it's like unboxing. So every time they get to that point of like, but why? The next page goes, oh, that's why. So pictures and a few words. You never not want those presentations if you're going to use them in a room to have too many words. You see, you know, accounting firms, etc. Like it's all spreadsheets and graphs, which makes sense to their people. But if you're pitching a broader audience, big, strong, bold pictures and as few words as possible. But that's why you've got to rehearse these pictures 1,000 times and listen to them, because you've got to do the colour. You've got to make them come alive and then unbox them in a way that people get everything they need out of it and want to know more at the end.
And that can be particularly hard if those who you are pitching the idea to aren't great, either aren't visual people or aren't great, and many of us aren't. Most of us aren't great conceptualizers. It's very hard. I mean, it's not. I did a marketing degree, wasn't taught. I've been to advertising school, it wasn't taught how to conceptualize. You know, like, so that's where pitching becomes so important. You know, little tricks like, oh, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre meets Breakfast Club, and at least you start to then the idea starts to slowly. Oh yeah, I get that. So it's really violent, and then it's this or that or whatever. But it is very hard when people aren't trained to conceive an idea. Do you just have to be patient? I imagine you've been confronted with this all the time.
Yeah, I think patience is really good in the room, because some audiences that you're pitching to will sit back and just soak it in. Others will need to be the loudest voice in the room mid-pitch. You've got to go through, to mark down all those questions you know you're going to get, so you've got answers. Don't be afraid to say, hey, I haven't really approached that, but that's a really good question. You know, I'll take that on board. Because if you try to answer things with a non-genuine answer that you haven't thought about, it will be your undoing. So appreciate the people in the room, what they bring to the table, even if they are annoying the hell out of you, or they're asking all the wrong questions, or things that you've just explained they don't get. You just got to remember, sometimes it might be very clear in your mind, but the way you're explaining it doesn't make it clear to everyone else. So who's the lowest common denominator in the room? We always talk about, there's a kid in the room who's 12 or 13. Using the Breakfast Club reference isn't going to work for him because he doesn't know what it is. So, find reference points that work for who's going to be in the room. Know who's going to be in the room is really important too.
Everyone's watched Breakfast Club, Dan, so let's just kind of get clear on that.
Sorry, mate, sorry.
They haven't all watched St Elmo's Fire, but they've all watched Breakfast Club.
Well, they should. As long as they've watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I'm all good with it.
Correct. I'm with you.
Right.
Hey, speaking of patience and petulant children, and I've just lost all my Republican listeners, did you work with the ex-president on The Apprentice?
Yes, we had Donald J. Trump on The Apprentice. It was an interesting. I only did the development of the show. I never worked in production on The Apprentice. But the intent early on was that Donald would be on for one season, and then it would move on to other hosts. Later on, they did Martha Stewart, and further later on, we did Schwarzenegger. Neither of those really resonated for various reasons, but Mr. Trump captivated an audience with the way he acts, and we've seen that then proliferate and grow to a different level. But I'm not responsible. I was just an Indian there.
I don't know. You'll say I can't tell you. I can't answer this question, but I am interested. How much? And I haven't watched a lot of Trump, and maybe I've watched a couple of episodes of Trump on The Apprentice. I have a sense of what he was like. Was he fed though? Was he fed the lines? Is it totally scripted? I guess it's a bigger question around reality TV too. Totally scripted, totally controlled, or you just had to let him go?
With Trump specifically, there's certain boxes you have to check with the process, the you're fired, etc. So a team of writers, or producers generally put in the major building blocks. But the reason why Trump was so successful on that, or Jeff Probst is so successful on Survivor, is they really own the show. Like, they take it on board. For Trump, it was an opportunity to really be in the limelight. Like, it was his 15 minutes of fame that just went on, and he was just very good at talking. Like it or not, he captivated people with his charisma, if you want to call it that.
Do you have any thoughts on how much of the character that he created on The Apprentice became a major selling point for him becoming president?
Oh, without a doubt.
Were people buying that?
Yeah, a lot of people called him basically a failed businessman, that his father's fortune was, getting put out to pasture by him. And we being The Apprentice, sold him as the most successful businessman in America, because that's what you want your host to be. And people believed it. And all of a sudden, things changed, things turned around. So I think the power of TV really put him on a pedestal that otherwise he would have never attained. Yeah, I'm not a good thing from my point of view, but hey.
I imagine you've worked with some pretty difficult people in the space that you've been occupying these last 20 years.
Oh, mate, just some amazing people, amazing hosts, and some less so. One who I won't mention would not go on set until he finished his cigar, and he made us wait 3 hours with a full audience while he smoked a cigar. And his response to me when I asked him to come on set, he's like, "Do you want me to give you what you pay me for when I come on stage, or do you want me to come now and it won't be good?" And I said, "I'd like you to come now and I hope it's good." And he just sat there and smoked his cigar for the next 2 hours. So while an audience sat there waiting.
Geez, I thought Arnie would be a lot more polite than that.
Wasn't Arnie, no.
Oh, really?
Arnold was amazing that, he took over the role of hosting The Apprentice. He would be on set basically when the lights were still out, and he'd be in the boardroom just being that method actor and getting in the feel of the room, and he'd read his notes, he'd do the work. He was really good.
I love hearing stories like that. There is a lot we can all learn from those values of, whatever that value's called. I was listening to an interview with Hugh Jackman recently. He'd done that film, The Son, I think it was called. And Anthony Hopkins was his lead. Now, Hopkins, talk about acting royalty. And Hugh was just in awe by the fact that the soundstage they were filming on was out on Long Island. Hopkins was staying at a hotel in Manhattan. Show call for him was 10 o'clock each morning to roll up to studio. Hopkins would be there at 6 a.m. in the morning and sit with the security guard and just immerse himself in the environment. Couldn't be more excited to be there doing the work, and
that's amazing.
Yeah, and well, it is amazing. And, I don't know, I've read a lot of rock star autobiographies too. And, the Phil Collins of this world, the Bruce Springsteens of the world, the Madonnas of the world. There's a reason they are who they are.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Because they do what you just talked about with Arnie. They just put in.
Yeah. But I think you find the same on the non-celebrity. I've worked with producers. There's, people that work at coffee shops that they turn up the volume to 100%, and they are there, they're present, they're not on their phone or goofing off. We all have bad days, but I think across the board there's people like that are just inspiring to be around. It's great when they're a celebrity and you can brag about it later. Hey, I worked with so-and-so and they're amazing, or hey, they were an asshat. But, it is great when you see someone rise to that level and they're still just real people. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. I did quite a lot of celebrities then, but I do see that a lot in small business owners. I mean, having interviewed over 640 over the journey, I mean, it's a trait that, when you see it, it's a delight to see and hear people talking about the way they approach their work. And I guess with small business, it's our babies, so we really, we get stuck in, roll the sleeves up and get stuck in. If you could choose any person, Dan, to lead a brainstorming session for a small business looking to generate ideas around a campaign or a new product or service or whatever it would be, who would it be?
I think it's probably a bit predictable here. I think it'd be Mark Burnett. Like, I'm not going to say Da Vinci or something because I don't know what they were like in the room. They might have been a pain in the ass to work with. But Mark, again, he would do that jump in even if you can't swim sort of attitude and come up with things that were very left of centre. Sometimes we would have to, like, en masse sort of shout him down and say we can't go that far. But he would just, like, come back with great ideas all the time. I think when he really blew me away was, it would come off the back of Survivor, The Apprentice, The Voice, Rockstar, just all these big network shows. And then he was coming out with a new show, which I didn't have a lot to do with, called The Bible. And it was basically, he'd been working with all the big networks, and now he was going to go to History Channel and do a retelling of the Bible as a mini-series. And everyone's like, what are you doing? And it just smashed records across America for viewership. It wasn't a great show in that, like, the CGI was terrible, the acting was but he knew his audience. He knew that if you were an American Christian, you almost had to watch it. It was almost like, it's like going to church on Sunday. You better go, otherwise everyone's going to know you didn't. And he just knocked it out of the park. And it was just his intuition, his hard work, but just a great idea. So I think a brainstorming session with Mark Burnett never goes astray.
He obviously just fished where the fish were. Like, he wasn't precious 100%. About, oh, no, I have to do something on a tropical island or I have to do something in a New York skyscraper. He would just go, you know what? That's genius. He stepped outside. Was he a religious man, or was he just saw an opportunity?
Well, as I said, he was a bit of a method producer, so I think he got very religious. His second wife, Roma Downey, was on Touched by an Angel, and she is quite devout. So I think Mark, through their relationship, probably either got an idea there or he turned a corner. But yeah, I don't know that it was sort of his go-to begin with. But yeah, just he saw an audience as like, holy, like, why is no one making this show?
How do you protect an idea, Dan?
That's probably one of the biggest questions I get from new people coming into the industry. It's like, I don't want to tell anyone because they'll steal it. I saw Mike Darnell at Fox take, Mark went in and pitched The Contender, which was a boxing show. And Mike Darnell said no, and he came out with The Next Great Champ. He basically just took the idea and ran with it. Now, they can say they had the idea already, that's fine. But, it happens all the time. I think you've got to bring something to the table other than the idea, which is why you're important in executing it. So, I'm not going to go and pitch a big scripted show because I'm not the writer, I'm not the producer in that sense. But if you're going to take on a big challenge-orientated reality program, why wouldn't you take me? It's my idea, and I've got 20 plus years of doing those shows. So I think, or, bring together some talent that is going to resonate and get them under a good deal, which, requires you to be there. So you've got to bring something other than the idea, because ideas come and go. You've got to make it a little bit stronger than that.
Is there an idea that you've pitched that you were just so big on, you just wanted to see it get to market, and it just got buried?
How long have we got to talk about this part of the show?
Well, okay, 2 questions then. Share one of them with us if you can, and B, how do you feel about it? Do you just have to move on? Do you go and punch a couple of bunching bags in the back room? What do you do?
Yeah, so one that I've still got on my back burner that I'm still pitching is called Camping World Cup. So it's sort of Survivor for families, but we're all weekend warriors, and it's like, who does it better? The guy that drives the RV, the woman that likes hiking and tenting, and put them in a world where they can compete on an even playing field. For, who is the grand champion? We had so many good dad jokes in this pitch.
Champion.
We got a trophy all engraved for the pitch and would take it in, and I was 100% in on this one. I was, you can't be 200%, but if you could, I would have been. And we got quite a way through the process with a number of networks, and then they're like, camping's too niche. Camping's too niche. Someone will probably hear this podcast and they'll go and make the show now. That's fine. I don't think I'm over it. But, we've still got some interests in Europe, of all places. They're big campers. So in the Netherlands, we've sort of got some interest there from a network. So I'll keep pushing it while the idea is still fresh, or fresh enough for me to take out and own.
Mm-hmm. So you've left the corporate world, so to speak, after 20 years on reality TV. You're now a freelance creative. What's that mean for you? You're a small business owner, mate. Welcome to our world.
Thanks. No, that's. I guess I just I've been in development for 10 years, so I was in production for 10 years, in development for another 10. Development and pitching is a very, very no orientated game, and it was just sort of going from the US where you'd go into a room and like everyone wants things bigger. Like, oh, that's great, but can you get bigger stars? Can we, we'll spend more money. That's really the attitude over there, for better or worse, to Australia and pitching to the Australian networks, which is much more risk adverse. Generally, all the big ideas you see on TV in the reality space or the unscripted space are shows from everywhere else. The Voice, Survivor, even MasterChef, etc. They're ideas that have came from somewhere else. So pitching the ideas that I like to play with in this environment is sort of not where I want to be. So taking a step back out of like full-time employment, I'm now just partnering with production companies. I know that they do get into the US market or the European market more. And so I'm taking my ideas out in that way. Doesn't stop me generating. It just means I'm not front and center of most of the pitches. You give up some of the ownership for that, which is fine. I'm happy to take a bit of a backseat for the next year or two and just generate and not be at the front line.
You say you hear a lot of no's. How do you deal with that mentally, psychologically?
Gin and tonic is one way. I don't know. I hear from a lot of colleagues that do production and have tried development. They're like, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you get up after, in the mornings for 3 or 4 no's to things you've spent months, sometimes years on in your inbox. And you just got to brush yourself off. I use the American quarterback sort of analogy of you throw an interception, next time out, you've just got to throw a deep ball and try and win. You really do. Trust your skills, trust your judgment, go out with good product. And it's all about contacts. If you're living in a bubble and you don't sort of talk with the people who are the buyers and socialize them with them, you've got to do a bit of that schmoozing, because you sell shows over a beer or a coffee or in the surf. You don't generally sell them in the room. It's all about who you know as much as what you know. So you've just got to get back up and put 100% in again. And it's hard, but that's why there's only a few people doing certain things.
It's the old cliche, for every no, you're one step closer to a yes.
Yeah, well, you hope so. Or
Cold comfort.
Or to giving up, yeah, but no.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and like I always say to people bringing me new ideas who are like a bit greener, is like, and they're so passionate, and I'll be like, this has been done before, I don't think it'll cut through. My constant response is, this is not the best idea you will ever have. You will have better ideas than this one. You've just got to keep going. And like, I look back at shows I was pitching 5 years ago and I'm like, I could have done so much better with this. Or 20 years ago, I'm like, this is ridiculous. But, I'm improving my craft every day. And I think we all got to remember that you get to know, how can I make it better? Whether it's the same idea and improve it or go in a different direction. How is my pitch got to get stronger? What contacts do I need to make to sell this better? You've just got to keep on that.
There's a lot of business owners listening, Dan, who go, yeah, but I'm just not creative. It's just, this is not my wheelhouse. I'm good at running the business. I'm good at doing the books, but I'm not creative. Personally, and as I said in my introduction, creativity can be your point of difference. A good idea can be a business's point of difference in a world of sameness. The old USP is everything. Anything you can say to business owners who don't believe they're creative?
I think do that list of pros and cons about things you like. For me, you've got to watch TV. As much as I don't like watching TV, I'd rather be outside doing something else. I'll watch one episode of everything new that comes out. And even if I hate it, it'll be, what do I like about this show? Because again, I can't go and pitch a show I don't like or don't believe in. Some people probably can, but I've got to go through that list, and that will then generate ideas from, here's the things I like about the 10 new shows that dropped this summer. How can I take that forward? So you might not be creative, and let's use the bar example again. Go to some really different bars. Go to an indie bar, go to a live music venue, go to some sort of tea room and write down what you like about things. Those visual stimulus, those catalysts will drive you to coming up with ideas. And then get other people involved. Find people with good ideas. Get them on board. You don't have to do everything. The good idea you might have is getting someone to have the ideas for you. You just sort of like, I can run the business, but hey, what do we make this look like? How do we make it feel? Find the right person.
One of the things I used to do when magazines were a thing, and you can still do this because there are still magazines in the newsagents. Go and buy some magazines unrelated to your industry. If you're in cars, selling cars, then go and buy some magazines on tattoos, or go and buy Rolling Stone magazine or
100%.
Country Living or whatever it is. And just get out of your industry, get out of your head and get into someone else's space. And that can spark some new thinking, because at the end of the day, we are all creative. As humans, we are creative beings. We just need to acknowledge it more.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan, love talking to you, mate. Absolutely loved it. Where can I send people? I don't imagine Dan Munday has got a website, or has he?
No, he doesn't yet. I'm entering this new phase, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Just call Tim, and he'll move you on.
Yeah. Oh, so I'm your agent now. Let's negotiate that, Dan.
No, I'm a big fan of the agent.
Okay. Well, how about I take 80% of all your earnings? Are you happy with that?
For the last week, no worries. Yeah, there was nothing.
Yeah, good on you. Hey, Dan Munday, thanks for sharing your ideas around ideas, and I wish you all the best.
Mate, it was a pleasure. Chat soon.
Well, there you go, team. Ideas guy, Dan Munday. Not a bad little resume. Survivor, The Apprentice, Real Housewives, wowee. I'd love to hear what role ideas play in growing your business. Do you set time aside for blue sky thinking? Or is it too painful? Maybe you're one of those business owners who don't think they're creative. Stop that right now. Or maybe it's the most enjoyable part of your working week. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Give the Small Business Big Marketing hotline a buzz on 0480 015 150. That's 0480 015 150. Righto, it's time for you to take action on what you've learnt, because ideas remain exactly that, without action. If you'd like to support the work I do for small businesses and want even more of me, then check out my exclusive business owner membership over at patreon.com/marketing podcast, where membership starts at a tax-deductible $8.50 a month, and you can trial the silver tier, which is $47 a month for 7 days without obligation. Hey, if you enjoyed today's episode, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already on your favourite podcast app, where you'll find 643 more chats with successful business founders. Big thanks to Sam Heathcote for stitching the marketing gold together, and in-house rock star Lockie Doley for the wonderful music bed you hear throughout. But most importantly, a very, very big thank you to you, the motivated business owner, for lending me your ears and making the time to tune in. It can only help your business, I hope. Until next time, may your marketing be the absolute best marketing. Bye for now.